views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good morning. Thank you for being with us here. I am Ruben Diaz Jr., the Bronx Borough President. I am here with the Regional Director for HUD, Ms. Lynne Patton. This is not her first time in the Bronx. She came here several weeks ago where we were able to break bread and have a conversation about a myriad of different issues where we can work together. Everything from seeing how is it that we can continue to build upon senior housing, what is it that HUD can do throughout the Bronx in different projects, and of course, the one issue that is upon everybody's lips, which is how do we do better by NYCHA and public housing. And I found it so reassuring of your knowledge and the fact that you care, that you cared so much, you're coming back, you wanted to see it. And so we're here at Patterson, where I was, some of you were here covering just last year, where we know that unfortunately what's behind us, these structures here are supposed to be temporary boilers, but they've been around since 2011. For me, last year when we were here, after so many calls from seniors and so many hospital visits that our kids had to take because people were freezing not only here, but it was all over the city of New York. This is one of the developments where we figured, why do we have this problem?
That's right.
Why do we have this problem when the permanent boilers that's supposed to go here have been fully funded since 2011? And so, as I said earlier, there's a show on HBO that's called Game of Thrones, and they say winter is coming. And before we get in the middle of winter, before we get the same level of complaints, and before we get seniors who are freezing in their apartments and children who have to be rushed to hospital visits, we wanted to come here and bring the regional director so she can see for herself how is it that we can solve this issue once and for all. And that's why we're here, and we welcome you. Thank you for being with us here.
Thank you, Borough President Diaz. And it's a pleasure to be back in the Bronx. My team knows that I like to get out and put my feet on the ground. As nice as my office is, if I'm not out every other day, they're doing something wrong. It's about getting out, meeting the folks, meeting the people who are truly affected. And Patterson Houses suffered a grave injustice last year. When you are still describing a boiler as temporary, since it's been here, but it's been here since 2011, that no longer fits the definition. And as Judge Pauly and President Diaz said, winter is coming. And, you know, Judge Pauly is asking the questions, why did NYCHA only spend $106 million out of $483 million earmarked specifically for boilers last year? So I'm asking the same questions, and I want the same answers this time. You know, we need to know why Patterson Houses has not issued an RFP for a new boiler. And I have a monthly breakfast with Stanley Brezanoff. I asked him this question yesterday. He intends to look into it and get some real answers this time, and hopefully we'll be able to make a major announcement soon, because I'm going to hold NYCHA's feet to the fire. The consent decree is going to hold NYCHA's feet to the fire, and we look forward to finally getting it signed off on and making sure that the funding that commits the city, state, and federal government to fixing this problem once and for all is ultimately used the way it was intended.
Again, we're here with the Regional Director of HUD, Ms. Lynne Patton, those that just got here. We've also been joined by Ms. Patton and the Tenant Association President.
Now they brought in a temporary gas boiler that maybe we can walk over and see. And prayerfully, that will be more helpful than what you see right here.
So I just want to be corrected 1 second. I said earlier that this has been here since 2011. The funding of the permanent boilers has been done since 2011.
Correct.
So the funding, at that time they had boilers here. They fully funded new boilers. 3 years ago they brought in the temporary boilers. But what we're saying, it shouldn't take this long once you already have the money. I mean, here we are in other developments trying to fight for new money. But even when we already have the money and they fully funded for all these years, this should not be the case. And so, again, we are here to try to get ahead of the curve. I don't want to come out here again, and we said this last year, Pat, right?
Sure did.
We said, you know, winter is going to come again. So we're trying to come here now, or we are here now with the regional director, trying to do this, trying to solve this before the middle of winter is upon us. And so that's why we're here today.
We need to put Patterson Houses on the map and on the list of priorities for a new boiler, and a permanent one at that. It's unacceptable at this point.
NYCHA is strapped for cash, and all of us at every level of government have to do our share to find that money.
That's
Whether
right.
it's at the borough level, the city level, the state level, the federal level. The answer to that is yes. But my question is, when you already have something that's fully funded, like the boilers here, why is it taking so long? It should not be the case. Again, I see that Monica's here. I see News 12 is here. Just to bring you up to speed, we were here last year. Some of you were freezing with me walking the grounds. And this is not just a conversation that we've been having about Patterson with Ms. Pat in terms of heating or the lack thereof. This is a conversation that's been happening all around public housing citywide. The reason why we were here last year is because we said that even when NYCHA has financed boilers, people are still going without heat, and that should not be the case. So we're here with the regional director of HUD, Lynne Patton, and we're here before winter comes, so that we can solve this, so that we can make sure that we address this before senior citizens are freezing in their living rooms, before babies have to be rushed with pneumonia to the doctor and to the hospitals. And I'm so happy that she joined us.
And again, I want to laud Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr. for all his efforts in bringing attention to Patterson Houses. This is not about politics, this is about humanity. The mayor has dedicated money to boilers. The governor has dedicated money to boilers. HUD gives over $2.4 billion every single year to NYCHA. It is not being used the way it was intended, and we need to get to the bottom of that. I'll be tweeting out a breakdown of those figures later for those of you who want the specific math. But it's $2.4 billion, my team told me, every year to NYCHA across an array of programs. There is no reason, you don't need a signed consent decree to get something done that's been funded since 2011. And we want answers, and we're not taking the same old responses anymore.
And we were able to do a couple of things last year. If you remember, I was the one who suggested that we should have an emergency declaration. And what that would do is expedite the procurement process.
Yes.
And there's been a whole debate and conversation with the city and the state as to how is it that we can expeditiously go through that process that's taken for so long. Again, not only here, not only with boilers, but also with repairs. I've given financing to the community center how many years ago?
$139,000, and we want to get to the bottom of where those computers are.
Right, not only here, but in Bronx River and in other developments, Brosneck. So we believe that an emergency declaration is a great way, and that's a technical definition. Yes, when people are freezing, it is an emergency. But when we say emergency declaration, is a technical definition so that we can expedite the procurement process, so that we don't have to go through all of the stages that take so long, so we can hurry up. And again, just to re-emphasize what the regional director said, what Director Patton said, this is not about politics. I am less concerned about the politics. I am more concerned when people like Clarissa's grandmother, who lives here, and Ms. Pat, and so many folks who are here are going freezing. They freezing more in their homes than they would if they were in a courtyard here in this development. And that is unacceptable. It is inhumane, and it should not be happening in the city of New York, the richest city on the planet in this day and age.
You know, what people don't understand is that NYCHA is the size of the city of Miami. Right. The population of the city of Miami lives inside NYCHA buildings. And if the city of Miami lost 85% of, let's just say, their air conditioning, and you had elderly and children sweltering in the heat, that would be a national story. Why the loss of heat for a population larger than the city of Miami is not a national story, I do not know. But it needs to be, and I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure it is one.
Winter's coming, Mr. Mayor, and to everyone. It's not just the mayor, it's everyone, Monica. We, you know, whether it's the city of New York that I've said in the past have shown gross ineptitude in addressing the repairs and the heating issues here in the city of New York as it relates to public housing, but the state, everyone. Now is the time. Let's not wait until the middle of winter and then say, oh my God, we have to address this. Let's do this now. We have every level of government, and so that's why we're starting the conversation once again right now before winter's upon us.
Well, the city says they're working on it. They say they've been diligently working on it since the very beginning. What do you want to say to that, Ms. Patton?
Well, you know, as Ruben Diaz said earlier, the procurement process is cumbersome, yes, but it doesn't take 7 years. It doesn't take 7 years. So to me, there just is no excuse when the funding is there. You know, we can cry and point fingers about 17 years of bipartisan divestment by the federal government, but it doesn't solve anything. You know, your mom always used to say there's no point in crying over spilled milk. That day has passed. You know, we need to work together. We need to move forward. You know, both Democrats and Republicans defunded public housing. This president signed off on a budget that raises public housing funding for NYCHA by 51% this year.
Well, the chair, just yesterday, the chair of NYCHA says that, I mean, pointedly squared it to the federal government and lack of funding. Last night, the chair said that.
You know, again, I do want to say I like Stanley Brezanoff. Again, we have a monthly breakfast. But the motivation behind his statements of late truly perplexes me. His boss applauds the consent decree, signed the consent decree.
He said he doesn't think it's a good idea.
Well, you know, unfortunately it's not up to him, or rather fortunately for us, it's not up to him. The City Hall has already released a statement saying that they denounce his denouncement. But what I will say to this is that if he's angling for more federal funds, again, HUD gives NYCHA $2.4 billion every year, not every 5 years. The city is giving $2 billion over the next 5 years. We give NYCHA $2 billion and $2.5 billion every year.
And let me just jump in on that. Let me just say this. The fact is, yes, NYCHA needs funding. Yes, we all have to do that. But before you ask for more money, why don't you show us that you have the capability to deal with the funding that you already have. Yes. In Patterson Houses, they already have fully funded boilers for 7 years. Get those in. Show us that you have the capability to do it. I mean, something as small, and you were with us when we were at Bronx River, computer labs. How long have they had funding from my office and from the local elected officials? And we still haven't had the computers purchased there. The school year is already a month old, and our babies over there who don't have computers at home don't have them. Miss Pat, I came and visited you 4 or 5 years ago. You told me to fund, and by the way, it makes me look bad because then residents think that I wasn't, I'm not living up to my end of the bargain. I kept my promise. I financed the community center. Miss Pat and all of the tenants here are still waiting for that money, which is not a lot of money. So yes, you need billions. And yes, we all need to work, and I'll be the first to be out there on the front lines, and I'll continue to put capital funding where I need to. But just show us that you are capable of dealing with the funding that you already have.
So many of the people on Facebook say they want to see the mayor in public housing. Why doesn't he come like once a week, every other day?
That's a question for the mayor. Bob?
Okay. It was $18 billion that NYCHA needed last year. Now it's up to $32 billion. But my question to you, Borough President Diaz, and to HUD Secretary, is I said to the Chancellor 2 months ago that Bronx schools are not up to par with the city schools, and he agreed. He said the mayor and I know that Bronx schools are not up to par with the city, and now we saw yesterday the Bronx plan come out.
Mhm.
Do we have the same situation here with NYCHA, where the Bronx is being, how can we say it? Shortchanged.
We've always, Bob.
Would you check into this?
Let me go first. Bob, you know, and we all know, everybody who's around here, we all know that we've always been shortchanged. And as the borough president, I've always said that I was tired of being in first place in everything that's bad and in last place in everything is good. So I've tried the best that I can, working with elected officials and activists and advocates and tenant leaders to make sure that we get our fair share. What happened yesterday with the UFT contract, I applaud. It didn't happen by chance. It was about me having a conversation with Carranza and saying, you really want to change around the city numbers? Take a look at the Bronx. And now we see that there's a huge concentration to retain the best teachers, the most experienced teachers right here in the Bronx. And so what we get here today is setting aside, remember, she is the director, the regional director for HUD, the federal government. You all know I have no qualms in arguing and debating and calling out the federal government and this administration when I disagree with them, which is a lot lately. But we're putting aside politics. And so this is the second time she's with me, and this is part of that conversation that hopefully will give us the fruits of that labor that we saw in education, that we've been seeing in job creation, that we've been seeing in housing, and so on and so forth.
And look, you mentioned the capital needs number by NYCHA. Since my first lunch with Shola Oyatole, I've been questioning that figure in my head. I've done the math. You know, it's risen from 17 billion to 24 billion to now 34 billion. $34 billion breaks down to about $181,000 in repairs per NYCHA unit. Now, if you were to tell any private landlord in this city that it would take $180,000 to repair one of their units, they would laugh you out of the building. The majority of that funding is the result of union contracts that need to be abrogated and renegotiated by the mayor. I've been talking to his office about that. That's something that is inexcusable. We don't have the federal funding to waste on prevailing wages when the people need the safe, decent, and sanitary housing.
Brother, you have a question here. Are you with media?
No, I'm not with the media.
So
I'm sort of a resident here, and I want to know what kind of message that it sends when there's a concerted effort to install FiOS. There was a concerted effort to install FiOS here over the summer, really over the past year. And these boilers have been on the street for easily 5 years. I posted on Instagram a lot. And also, what about the issue of the diesel fumes that come out of these boilers?
I smelled them when I was walking by.
There's people who live there. There's kids that live in there, and they have to start the day off like that. So what kind of message
no, this is the. So I mean, obviously we are here today to say that this is not acceptable, that it's a health hazard, that it's an eyesore, that it's a canard. They say that it's temporary, but it's been here almost permanently already, and that there's fully funded boilers that should have already been in, and so that's why we're here. In terms of FiOS, you know, that's what, you know, that's a private company, but you're right.
About priority.
It's right.
Yes,
priority
yes.
should not be cable
Agreed.
TV over putting a boiler inside the building.
And that's why
the message that I get is that they really don't care, and then they'll never put boilers in here, and eventually that they're going to tear these buildings down and provide another spot for more gentrification.
We're not going to let that happen. That's what we're here for. This is public housing, and we're here with the HUD regional director.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
I'm just getting that message out here because that's how we feel here. That's how when we live here, that's what we see. We see FiOS come through, and they're like here all summer. Like, I'm an electrician by trade, and I look and I see all of this new stuff going in, all of this sort of like infrastructure, and then you have these boilers in the street for 5 years. And we address it every year, and they stay there. And who's paying for that? And where does that money go? Like,
That's why I brought.
Very good question.
Who's the contractor that gets the money for this? Like it's just crazy. It just
These things
seems
have
like
been here like 5 years now, right?
easily 5
years, and then
I've
they
posted
drove right
this on
into your
Instagram
window, that
easily
black
like
smoke.
5 to 6 times.
Terrible.
And they've been
Now they're
and the
And
money
in
they
the
paid
back.
to rent them, they paid.
They could have
They
bought
could have bought new ones,
You
right?
gotta follow that money, and then you can figure things out for sure, right?
That's why we're here.
I mean, that's common sense.
It's not my first time here, by the way, either. So
I know that.
we keep look. This is why we bring in all this
First time
attention.
that I'm able to
I
interact.
appreciate that. This is why we could, look. We could be anywhere. That's why we continue to bring the media here. Now we bring in the federal government here. We're going to keep paying attention. We're on top of it.
Is Ben Carson coming?
Yes, actually. I've spoken to him. I'm going to see him again on Monday. He is obviously very involved in the hurricane damage right now, but he's coming right after that, I suspect, sometime in October, November.
October, November. They'll be here.
Yeah.
At Patterson, or-
Absolutely.
Wow.
All right, we have a question.
So quick question, just if you have any comments on residents assuming risk when they do come and move into these buildings?
Well, I can only echo Judge Pauley's comments, which are, it's the kitchen sink, meaning they're throwing every excuse in this lawsuit, including the kitchen sink now. It's inexcusable, it's deplorable, and quite frankly, it's inhumane. I mean, again, it doesn't matter who's suing whom. At the end of the day, you don't blame the victim for something that they should have been, eradicating for several years. There's no excuse. It was reprehensible.
Is this going to be a worse winter than we had last year? I just want your prediction, each of you.
I mean, I'm not a meteorologist.
No, I mean,
But right.
weather-wise, yeah.
The question is, you and I, Monica, during this winter, where you live and where I live, we're gonna have heat.
Yeah.
And so what we're trying to do is put a face to the fact these are human beings, these are our New Yorkers, these are our residents. And one night, 2 nights in my apartment, if I had no heat, that would be a pretty bad winter. These folks have been here months and years, winter after winter. And so whether it's gonna be worse than last year, hopefully not, that's why we're here. But there's a price to pay. We gotta make sure that we pay attention to the plight, to the pain that the residents here, and not only in Patterson. You have citywide viewers all throughout the city of New York. But I just wanted to make sure that we came back here because I promised Ms. Patton I would.
And how much money is set aside for the boilers for the
They've
Patterson
already
houses?
been paid.
So how much was it?
I don't know. Whatever they James, how many? They've been. That's the most mind-boggling thing. So it doesn't even I don't know what the money will get you. It's fully funded. Think about that. Think about
Saying that the boilers are paid for.
7 years. They've been paid for.
Now they're taking these out. Why they building temporary boilers in the back now?
Because they're saying that the RFP, the procurement process has taken too long. So, so that's why last year when I was here, I said cut the red tape, declare an emergency. An emergency declaration would allow for us to do that, so that you can just go through the procurement process faster.
Yeah.
And so here we are again. Hopefully they're doing that. But winter's upon us.
Will there be money set aside for, let's say, health issues concerning, let's say, with this diesel fuel? In the next 5 years, you may have kids or people growing up with all types of health issues.
That would be another lawsuit.
I know the class action is before Judge Pauley. That's really something for him to decide.
I'm sorry, repeat that last one there?
There's a class action right now before Judge Pauley, and that's obviously something for him to decide.
So I want to take the regional director to other sites. We've been touring parts of the Bronx. We appreciate you coming out and once again helping us shine light on this deplorable situation here at Patterson and with NYCHA. So thank you all.